Drinking with Authors may contain adult content. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Drinking with Authors. I am your host, as always, not as always, as of recently, Nick Savage, and I am drinking tonight, so watch out. I got some Quarter Horse right here with me. This show, as every show, is sponsored by Four Horsemen Publications, so head on down to their website, fourhorsemenpublications.com, and check them out. If you support them, they support me, and we, keep this rotation going. I want to welcome tonight award-winning author of The Year of Needy Girls, Patty Smith. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And before we begin, so I don't forget, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking a glass of rosé.
Rosé.
Since it's warm out, nice summer wine.
It is 100. It was at the highest point, real feel 101 down here today. What's it like up there?
Wow. I think it's been the low 90s.
See, when you're that high up, 90, low 90s, low 100s, it's all the same. Way too hot, and we need about 10, 15 degrees cooler. Mm-hmm. So enjoy that rosé. Which,
thank you.
I did learn rosés are a blend. It is literally a blend of like red wine and white to get the
That's right. Yeah.
color.
Get the pink.
It seems very obvious, but then again, there's grapes that are different colored. They could have just used a lighter grape, but no, it is actually a blend of wine. So you're drinking both. So tell us, The Year of Needy Girls. Lots of good reviews. By the way, love that cover. And for anyone who's listening, the cover is two ladies silhouetted standing on a cliff, but the cliff is actually the head of it's the head of I'm assuming the victim in the book. I did not get a chance to read it, but I'm assuming that head is the victim or the main character, one of the two. And
I think the main character, I would say, yeah.
The cliff is her head, and it is a beautiful cover.
Thank you.
A lot of covers nowadays are overly busy, and that makes you stay focused. Absolutely a brilliant cover. Love it. Tell us about it.
Okay. Yeah. And I love the cover too. I went through a bunch of bad ones before we settled on that. So that was a pleasant surprise. I often say it's a story about a teacher who's falsely accused of having a relationship with a student, with a female student, as it happens. And that's true. That's kind of the short version of what it's about. But when the book opens, there's a young boy who was abducted and murdered. I'm not giving anything away. You find this out in the first page or two, basically. And he was abducted by his next door neighbor, who was a man, and he is sexually abused. And so there's an uproar in the town, and there's kind of this witch hunt. The teacher in the story, Deirdre Murphy, lives with her partner, SJ, and she's a beloved teacher in the private school in town until kind of all hell breaks loose, and until the town sort of erupts in this furor over LGBTQ people working with kids. And as it happens, the student who's involved in this false accusation is also the daughter of the chair of the board of the school. So
daughter of the chair of the board. Okay, so she's kind of feels a little self-important there, I'm assuming.
She does, yeah. And well, her mother certainly does, anyway. Yeah.
And I read some reviews. As I will tell you, and people who listen often already know this, I don't get a ton of research. About half an hour, I get to do a blitz of research and stuff. It is the book itself is set in kind of a two-sided town, with the wealthy on the one side, which is where the teachers teach, and then the girl who's murdered is on that side. No, if I recall right, she's on the rich side of the town.
It's a boy actually who's murdered.
It's
a boy.
The boys from the other side of the town, but the false accusations come from the rich side of town.
Right, the rich side.
Thank you for correcting me. Yes,
that's right.
It's your book. I just make up what I know. And they always say, write what you know. And I'm not saying that you were accused, but
No.
You have a wife, and the world is not as open to things as we, need them to be. Right. So there was some, I'm assuming, lived experiences that kind of made, and not necessarily exact lived experiences, but some lived prejudice and experiences that help contribute to this book.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm originally from Massachusetts, and I taught for 10 years in a private school in Massachusetts. So in terms of the ways that Deirdre might be like me, I think we both felt at odds in this private school world. It was a world I was unfamiliar with growing up. I did not, grow up in that milieu. And when I first started teaching, I was a little bit taken aback, I think, by all the, not just the wealth, but I guess the privilege and the kind of lives that these kids, and through no fault of their own, are leading. And then just kind of the whole culture of the school felt very foreign to me. And I felt very much like an outsider, as Deirdre does also in the book. And then I also happened, so after I left that particular school, I was teaching in another school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And there was a young boy named Jeffrey Curley, who was 10 years old, who was abducted and murdered much the same way it happens in my novel. And by his next door neighbor, by two men, as it happened, one of whom was a neighbor, someone he knew. And I was teaching 5th and 6th grade, and my students knew him, and they played Little League with him. And so it was part of our day. The kids were coming to school scared. They wanted to talk about it. And it was horrific. But his parents also made a point of talking about how this was not a gay crime. It had nothing to do with anybody being gay. It had to do with, who knows, right? Like potentially pedophilia, but not certainly anybody being gay. And I remember at the time, though, thinking, what if they hadn't said that? Like, what if they hadn't come out and made that kind of claim? Like, could there have been some sort of witch hunt, if you will? And I think part of also what I was thinking is that, here I was living in Massachusetts, which in theory is quite a liberal place to live, and at accepting, and it is in a lot of ways. But even then, there were these kind of subtle undercurrents I always felt about, like, I don't know, like a sort of false tolerance in a certain way. Like, oh, it's okay as long as it's not my kids, or it's okay as long as, like in theory, I'm all for it, but I don't. And this was, of course, what I was teaching was back in the 80s and early 90s. So it's been a while, but I think I was trying to get at that idea too,
No, and I think, and I don't want to speak for any people as a whole, because I am obviously a man and cis, but I feel like when people associate, because I've seen it from other straight people, when they associate being gay, like you said, had they not made that claim, it's not a gay crime. It's, you know what I'm saying? Pedophile or murder at the very most, or very least, whatever. People somehow make that association that if someone, or did back in the day, that if someone's gay, they must be attracted to kids. But I think that is very much a projection of how the people making those accusations feel. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think, there's a character. So Deirdre's best friend in the book is a male teacher, and he kind of is like, he makes some sort of comment about one of the girls being hot, and Deirdre's like, what? They're kids. Like, what are you talking about? They're kids. And he's like, oh, come on. You haven't thought that? And she's like, no, but so there's a lot, I think there's a lot in there about assumptions that people have and assumptions that people make. And, I was involved very early on in this group called GLSEN. They're still around. They're a national group for, we started in Massachusetts, and it was Gay, Lesbian, Straight Teacher Education Network once upon a time. I don't know what it stands for now, but the people that would come out, like when we would have conferences, the people that would protest were, I can't remember their name either, but it was something like Parents Against, I'm not thinking of it right, but something like Parents Against Kids Having Sex, whatever. And we're like, okay, we're all against that. Like, none of us are for that. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on. But that was always the go-to, was like, oh, they're going to do something to the children. They're going to corrupt the children.
And it's that try and stay away from using improper sentence structure. What you said is very true in the sense that people go to the worst possible assumptions of anyone that is not 100% like them. You know what I'm saying? Because, as you said, people are very much, in theory, I am okay with anything, but as long as it's not my kid or my family or anyone I know, keep it over there and away from me, and I'm fine with it. And it's like, then you're not actually fine with it at all.
Exactly.
And it's very hard. And I don't like to assume the worst of anyone. But how much of what we see in the media, because and this is a question, it's not a gotcha question. This is I'm wondering your thoughts. How much of what we see in the media and social media and everything like that, because social media is huge and anyone with a computer can have it, is just people who can't form their thoughts properly, saying something in a way they don't mean to say it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like, well, you're thinking about like people sort of jumping on the bandwagon or jumping in and making sort of pronouncements about, I don't know.
Yeah,
whatever they read in the news.
Because when I was younger, it took me a long time to be able to, and one of the many reasons I'm a writer is because speech is not my strong point. It's why I host a podcast. When I was younger, I would often say things and wouldn't be able to explain them to the depth of which I needed to clarify what I meant in the initial statement. You know what I'm saying? So then people thought I was much more bigoted or whatever. And it was like, no. I just wasn't educated enough at the time to clarify, to say clear enough what I wanted to say. Does that make sense what I'm saying there?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely true. And I think, I encountered a lot of that with my colleagues at the time too, who I think, were lovely people, good humans, maybe a little ignorant sometimes, or, unaware. And then, we all grow, we all get to change our minds. We all get to learn.
Hopefully
and move
we grow.
On,
Yeah. And that's the thing is hopefully we grow. And I'm not excusing my own ignorance, but because that's what it was. It was an ignorance back then.
Right.
But people never want to admit to being ignorant. They just want to be right. They just want to be felt and seen and heard at that moment. And it wasn't until you can start admitting you're wrong, like I did, you know what I'm saying? That you were able to change and grow and say things in a more concise and clear way. Because at the end of the day, as it's the big thing now, and because it's about the consent. And kids, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And, kids can't consent. And I'm not saying that if they could, it'd be okay to be attracted to them. That's a whole, you know what I'm saying? We're not going to go there with this. But it's just one of those things where it's very hard to write about clearly, which brings me in a very long-winded way to my next question.
Okay.
You wrote about very sensitive topics in terms of, as one of the press reviews said, keeping it morally ambiguous, keeping it realistically morally ambiguous. How did you find a way to keep the point of view non-biased while also having a very clear, this is what this is about?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think, part of it is you are getting 2 points of view. So you get Deirdre's point of view and you get SJ's point of view. And they're both blind to a certain degree to a lot of their realities. They see the world in kind of fundamentally different ways. So their relationship is struggling too while all this is going on. And Deirdre feels very a kind of almost motherly, I would say, affection for her students in a way that I, as a teacher, also, because I just ended a 40-year teaching career too last week.
Congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you. But I think she's wrong too. Like, I think she gets way overly involved in her students in ways that aren't healthy for anybody. Like, for not in a scary bad way, but just that she should, they have their life and she has her life, and she's crossing a boundary, I think, that she shouldn't be crossing in terms of her, even just her genuine concern for them in a certain way, So there's that. And then I think SJ has her blinders on too about who Deirdre is, or about like she grew up in this world. She grew up in this world of privilege, and she has a lot of disdain for the kids that Deirdre teaches, and she doesn't really understand their genuine needs, to that Deirdre sees. So I think seeing the world from both and getting both of their stories, you kind of, the reader's somewhere in the middle, and you're feeling like, oh, I can understand what Deirdre's feeling, and I can understand the judgment, because SJ, as it happens, doesn't believe Deirdre. Oh. So she thinks Deirdre is like, because she's kind of, they've gotten the phone calls during dinner where the kids are calling because Deirdre gives them her phone number so she can help with homework if they need it and all this kind of thing. And SJ just thinks, this is crazy. Like she blames her. She thinks that she's definitely crossed a line. But I also think, so, and I don't know if this is part of what's come out in the reviews too, but the other thing is, so Mickey Gilberto, who's, again, I'm not giving anything away, this, the reader knows from the get-go that he's the one that has killed Leo at the beginning of the book. Mickey, I've also been told by readers, is likable. And it's very disconcerting that he is this likable character who's done this heinous, awful thing.
But that keeps it also very realistic, because
right.
in knowing, going to the big names that we all know who are bad people, everybody loved Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
Everybody, even the ones, like, everybody loved John Wayne Gacy, and, all these serial killers who were horrible, like the worst of humanity. People were like, well, besides what they did wrong, they were wonderful people.
Yeah.
But what they did wrong pretty much outweighed any good they could have done. So
yeah. Although I guess I also thought I was, sorry to interrupt, but I was
no interrupt.
I was talking with police detectives when I was doing research for the book, and we were talking about how he might get caught and just various things, things that I didn't know about. And the detective said to me, well, what's his relationship like with his mother? And I thought, oh, I haven't even thought of that. So I had to sit down and think about it, but I had to think about it because I had to think about, okay, he is somebody's son, right? He's somebody's nephew. He's somebody's uncle. He's somebody's brother. He isn't just this guy who committed this horrible crime. He is that other person too.
Yeah.
As we all are, right? We all have that capacity in us, I guess, for good and evil. So, I don't know if that's part of it too, is to think about the people there. None of them are this or that. I think all the characters are kind of some mix of, I've had teacher friends say they're so furious at Deirdre when they read, they just find her to be so naive. And I was like, okay, so she is, but we were there one time. We've all been young teachers. We've all been new, and no one's told us like half the battles that we were going to face about figuring out that line about where we're not friends. We're not, we're not their parents. We're not their friends. We're this whole other different relationship. And nobody talks about that. You take all the classes about how to teach and how to do all, but nobody discusses that ever.
It's odd too, because kids, and that I can't speak on all, but when I was in high school, there were those teachers who I was like, I would be friends with them outside of school if, only I were, not in high school, much older or whatever. And right. I even went back after high school and had like lunch with them, where you're not calling them by their last name, you're calling by their first name. And it's very odd. And I don't want to say it's an improper relationship to have, because it wasn't like a sexual thing. It was just lunch with, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's very strange, because these are people who were mentors and people you looked up to, and to see them in a worldly human capacity breaks this illusion that almost needs to stay intact. Seeing a teacher in the real world, and I understand school's the real world, but as a teacher, you know what I mean by that. Seeing a teacher at the grocery store or, at the shopping mall breaks this illusion that they don't just live and sleep and eat at the school in their classroom. And it's almost one of those things where they say never meet your idols. Like you never meet the movie stars you look up to, never meet the writers you look up to, because it'll be disappointing. Seeing the teachers outside of that teacher relationship is almost disappointing.
Could be,
in the sense of, as a student, you hold them up to this. They know all this stuff and they're so perfect. And then you realize they don't necessarily always agree with what they teach, or they're not as awesome as you think they are, or maybe they are, but then there's other ways that, you know what I'm saying, they're not. And it's very hard. And I don't mean to talk so long. I'm just long-winded.
No, I mean, to me, it's really interesting stuff. And yet I have to say, one of the joys for me of social media, like one of the joys of Facebook, has been rediscovering all these students that I've taught all those years ago. You know, when I first started teaching, I was 24 and my students were 14. So now I'm 65, they're 55, you know?
That is, yeah. Okay. So, and I never like to ask anything inappropriate. So if what I say is inappropriate, please smack me through the computer. The world is not always a nice place, but it is worth fighting for, I believe. In your 40 years of teaching, and now being able to go on social media and see these students having lived and grown up and be these people with full lives, have you ever helped anyone embrace their true self in a way that you have? Because it's one thing for me to go, oh, I'm a guy and I like girls. Hey, you know, but everyone, you know what I'm saying? It's not no one cares. Have you ever been able to help anyone go, you know what, I'm gay and you helped me? And have you been able to see that play out in a good, you know what, I don't know.
You know, no, it's great. And you know what, I have. And some of it's been very recent. I recently got an email from 30 years ago, and the student just happened to have, she's a trans woman, and she reached out and she just said, I happen to be healing from the surgery and I have time on my hands. And she said, I think about you all the time and how when you came out and the bravery and how that encouraged me. And I never, told you, and I thought I should tell you. And it's like, are you kidding? That's amazing, And again, there are times as a teacher. So I've had that happen a few times. And as a teacher, I mean, I think, oh, thank goodness I helped. You know what I mean? Because you don't know. I mean, you don't know the impact that you have. And very few times do you get the opportunity for someone to tell you that. And so I think, oh, I'm so grateful that I was able to be helpful and not a hint. I had a student who, I'll tell you one other quick story too. No,
please tell stories.
We've become friends since then too. And she's now a teacher. And when we reconnected, she said, I have to tell you the story I have been hanging on to for, 35, 40 years. I've been hanging on to it. And she said, do you remember that time I used to take kids on this walk, the Walk for Hunger, it was called, in Massachusetts. It was a fundraiser walk. And she said, do you remember when we did that? And I said, I do. And she said, do you remember that I told a gay joke? And I didn't remember. And she said, and you didn't, like she said, I always remember you just you didn't say anything. And then you looked at me and said, and this is a little bit corny, but true. I said to her, your mind is like a parachute and it only works when it's open. And she said, I've never forgotten that. And I just remember that you didn't scold me, like you didn't, make fun of me, or you didn't, that's all you said, and you let it sit. And I thought to myself, oh, thank you, Lord, that's what I said, because I so easily could have, responded in 1,000 other ways.
No, and actually, can I touch on that for a moment? Because
sure.
At one point, everybody nowadays is so cautious about, oh, I can't let my bad past come out because whatever. People change and people have a capacity to change, despite what some of my favorite TV shows say.
Right.
And I used to know jokes, and they were bad jokes. They were jokes I don't repeat anymore. You know what I'm saying? Some have been forgotten, others I know, and I go, why did I ever say them? but I knew them and I didn't understand. And I think the person in that the story refers to may have been in similar shoes, where they knew the joke and they didn't quite understand the impact of it. Because I had a guy who was a friend in college and would let me just tell all these jokes to him. And I didn't understand the impact they were having, not necessarily on him, but the
Just
karmic
in general,
impact on the
yeah.
world. Yeah.
Right.
And it wasn't until years later, and I'm not taught, but I would love to be able to write him on Facebook and be like, you made me a better person by letting me get this out, because now I understand the impact they have. And I didn't say it to another person, you know what I'm saying, who would have done something much worse to me than just, but that response you had of your mind has to be open. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't this lecturing response. It was this, you need to get this out so you can become the better person that allows them to become the better person. And as someone who's been in similar shoes, thank you for having that response that you had.
Well, like I said, to some degree, that feels lucky, because I think I almost easily could have also lectured, or, you know what I mean? Like there was some grace that came my way that allowed me to take that minute and say it that way. Thankfully, you know, but it's, you know,
no, it's also funny because I think, and I do want to get to a story. My segues are going to be epic and how bad they are, but I do want to say one more thing on this before we talk about a camel.
Sure.
Yeah. Stick with us, listeners. I do want to say, though, that there are moments that are core memories in people's minds, like her in that moment with that joke and that response, that is a core memory in her mind that will never leave. The day she dies, she will remember that as some life-altering experience. And you are like, yeah, I don't even remember it. But that's how life goes. Sorry.
I know. And as a teacher, right? Like I think we have millions of these moments that we're unaware of, and some of them could be the other way around. Like you might say some kind of offhand remark that really hurts somebody's feelings. And, I hope not, but it seems in a 40-year career, that's probably inevitable.
But I think it's also a little bit of grace of, just being human, that sometimes, again, we don't assume the worst and assume that sometimes we say things with the best of intentions that may just not have been delivered with the best of aplomb.
Yeah.
I think that is the first time I've ever properly used the term aplomb. It's not that I don't have a vocabulary, it's just what I choose to use. But in my awesome segue, tell me about the camel in Timbuktu. So, okay, for anyone listening and going, what the hell kind of segue is that? I get these little fun facts, and she has ridden a camel in Timbuktu, which is not just a place that you say you live when you live far from society. It is an actual place in Senegal, if I'm saying that right.
No, it's in Mali. It's in Mali.
See, this is how bad my geography is. I don't even know where it's at. But you lived for a year in one country. You rode a camel in Timbuktu, which is in Mali. Before you tell us about the story, a little bit of geography. Where is that?
Okay, so if you can picture the outline of Africa, like if you can kind of just picture
Africa.
The general map, okay? And the westernmost little bump is Senegal.
Okay.
And it borders Mali. So there's Senegal, there's Mauritania is just to the north.
You're just making up countries now.
And then there's the Sahara and Morocco.
I know those countries. Okay.
And Senegal also borders Mali. So Mali is sort of Mauritania, Mali.
And you rode a camel.
I did. It was crazy. So I was living in Senegal. So back in the day, back in my earlier teaching life, I taught French, as it happens, also in Massachusetts. And so I got a Fulbright, and I went to Senegal, and I taught for a year in Senegal, and then I swapped positions. So a Senegalese teacher came and taught in my place for a year, and I taught in his place for a year. And while I was there, I met some other, it was 2 Fulbright professors, I think, both in Dakar. And and they were taking a trip to Mali over Christmas, and they said, "Do you want to go?" And I said, "Sure, yeah, sure." You know, who wouldn't want to go to Mali? When is this opportunity going to come again? So off I went. You know, and I remember calling my mother on the phone, which was a big deal back then because there weren't, you know, this was way, way, way before cell phones. This was 1988, 89. And I had to go. Yeah, I had to go to like a post office. And I mean, it was a big production to make an international call. And I remember calling my mother and telling her, "Mom, you know, I'm going on this trip and I'm going to go to Timbuktu." And she said, "That's hilarious." She said, "Think of all the times that's where I threatened to send you when you were a kid." Like, I'll send you and now you're going willingly. And I said, "I am." So we took a boat up the river from Mopti. It's hard to know if you don't know. And I don't really, you know, I wouldn't have known the geography either if I hadn't been there. But it was the last boat to make it up the river to Timbuktu. Which is really, it does feel like it's at the end of, you know, nowhere. You feel like
you say the last boat up to Timbuktu?
Yeah. It was
the river.
I mean, for that season, I think, because then the river dries up and they can't get any more boats up the river. So we're in Timbuktu. I know, right? It's all true. And there were 4 of us, and we met some Tuaregs who offered us camel rides in the desert. And we said, okay, again, you know, I don't know if I would recommend this today, but off we went into the desert with these Tuaregs, they're called the blue men of the desert because they wear these blue turbans and they're indigo dyed. So it's almost in their skin. Looks kind of, has this bluish tint to it. And you can just see their eyes, like the blue turbans all around their heads, and just their eyes are showing. And camels are not friendly animals.
I know they spit. That's all I know.
They do, and they're not comfortable. It's all kind of weird. And when you're walking, they're walking, and we're in the desert, right? So it's like these sort of hill. It feels like you're in water almost. That's kind of how unsettling it feels. You're kind of like this, you know, like womping around. And then I thought, you know, where are we going? Like, we're just, all you could see was sand. There were no buildings, and we finally get to some little like encampment. And they take us off the camels and they make us tea, and we sit around and we have tea. But anything could have happened. Do you know what I mean? Like, who would have known where we were? We're out in the middle of the desert. Oh, well, but it all was fine. Worked out fine.
The 80s and 90s were a very wild time. And it's funny, as a side note, there are people of like the Gen Z and the whatever, like the very younger generations who watched like Stranger Things and thought that lifestyle of like being out away from parents, coming home at like sunset was like fictionalized, and we weren't actually like that. And I'm like, no, that's how life was back then. And
exactly. My students say that to me all the time. They go, wait. You didn't have cell phones. I had this one student, he's like, you didn't have a tracking device when you were a kid? And I was like, no, we had no tracking devices. And he said, you just like went out? And I was like, we just went out. You were home by supper. Like, that was the rule when I was a kid, right? You had to be home by supper by 6 o'clock. And they said, but you just could be anywhere. And I was like, you could just be anywhere. And they said, well, couldn't you get like murdered, or like, couldn't like the serial killers get you? And I was like, I mean, I suppose, but I did not worry about that when I was a kid going out to play with my friends. I did not worry about the murderers and the serial killers.
I mean, in their defense, they see it all the time, so they worry about this. But the actual reality is 8 billion people. It's not like 5 billion of them are serial killers hunting us down. It's just that this skewed perception we have, and it's crazy.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying I miss the days of the 80s and 90s, because they were good for me. They weren't good for many other people. It's a very interesting time to have lived through and to be able to tell about now. But and this is going to be an odd question, but I need to ask it because I love tea. Was it good tea?
Oh my gosh. So yeah, do you know anything about like the tea ceremonies that they have in Western Africa or in I think they do it in Morocco also. Do you know? I know
nothing about tea ceremonies. I just know different types of tea.
Well, so there are 3 glasses of tea, and they're small. It's like a little shot glass kind of. And they cook it over the fire. And so the Senegalese describe it like this. It was very similar in Mali. The first glass is bitter. let's see if I can get this right. Is it bitter like life? And the second glass is a little bit sweeter. And then the third glass is very sweet like love. And I can't remember now what the second glass is, but it's real. So the first glass is a little bit, it's a little harsh, right? It's a little bit bitter, and then it gets significantly sweeter, but the rule is you stay until the third glass is served.
I'm assuming you drink the third glass too.
You do. Yeah.
Okay. Like it's only served.
You
You
drink
drink it. You get to drink it. Okay.
No, you drink them all. And it's good, but there's also like Morocco, it's a very elaborate system of pouring the tea, and in Morocco it's more minty. But as I recall, with the Tuaregs in Timbuktu, it was more like what I was used to having in Senegal.
Okay, because I know, like with teas, for a while I was huge, and I still love them. But right now I'm into the more, I don't want to say herbal teas, but flavorful teas like Genmai Cha and stuff like that, which is like the popcorn tea. For a long while I was into pu'ers, and I figured in the desert you'd have something that was a little more earthy, but no, sweeter teas.
Yeah, well, I think it's just the way they cook it. It's like they sort of foam up. They have these little like teapots that they would put on the campfire. And then they pour it like this, and it's very, kind of back and forth in these glasses, and it gets all kind of foamy. And I don't even know. I mean, I'm assuming it's a black tea, but I don't even really know.
But it was minty. It was very minty, you said. Or slightly.
Yeah,
minty.
well, in Morocco, it was minty. I think this was more, and then they add sugar, and that's how I guess it gets
that just changes
sweeter
it.
and
Yeah.
sweeter and sweeter. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's wonderful.
Yeah, but it was kind of cool. Yeah. I liked it.
So I have to ask, because as someone who went to cosmetology school and got their degree as my hair was falling out, you have been a hair model for L'Oreal.
Yeah.
And your students always get a kick out of this story, you said. So
They do.
You did not tell me the story backstage, so now I get to hear it for the first time with everybody listening. So
Okay.
how did you end up being a hair model for L'Oreal?
I know, another crazy, crazy story. My kids are always like, how did you have this life? And I was like, I don't know, felt regular to me at the time. But so I went to Paris as a student when I was in college. It was the second semester of my sophomore year. And then I returned, actually, and lived in Paris for about 2 years right after college. But I think it was when I was a student that this happened. I conflate the times. But somehow my friend and I were given a tip that if you went to L'Oreal, which was centered in Paris, right? the L'Oreal hair product, right place. And you went, and they would often have these hair shows where they invited, other professionals in, and they were looking for hair models. So they would sort of test your hair and see if it was, if they liked it or whatever, and they would choose you. And I guess they liked I have very thick hair. And so they liked it, and and you got to have a haircut by this master from L'Oreal for free. Like, you didn't have to pay anything.
Nice.
But the point was, you had no say in how the hair was cut. You just had to let them cut it on a stage for the show. And I kept thinking, well, they're not going to make me look bad because they're trying to, right? It's going to be something that's flattering, I think, no matter whether it's something I would like or not. I don't know. But the problem was, I'm not a small person, and Parisians are notoriously small, tiny. So they would try to give me these like satin outfits I was supposed to wear while I was on stage. And it was a big dilemma. They were always like, oh, that's not going to fit you. What are we going to do? And I was like, I don't know. You figure it out. Let me know what I'm supposed to wear and I'll wear it. But I did it a few times. It was kind of cool.
Did you ever have a haircut that you were unhappy with?
No, but it was very dramatic. So the last one I had was sort of very severe and not radically. I mean, if you can see not radically different from mine now, but it was sort of like sharp, and it was spiky. I mean, I was young, right? I was in my 20s, so it was kind of perfect. And I came home when I came home from France, I had a leather jacket and this spiky hair, and I think my family was all like, "Oh my God, what happened to her? Where'd she go?" But I loved it.
No, it's funny because No, I'm glad you enjoyed it, because when I was in cosmetology school, and this isn't a me story, but I knew people that did the hair modeling for the shows, and sometimes it was the students who got asked to cut on stage because they were that good. They were,
Oh.
and I was not that good.
Mm.
And so they, these students who were excelling would have these models on stage. And much like fashion shows, where the fashion isn't necessarily what you're going to see in the stores, it's just meant to inspire what you've seen. The hair was the same way. It was meant to inspire the upcoming trends. And so it was sometimes the models would walk away holding back the tears because this was not what they were expecting.
Yeah.
And I went to school at a time when like the choppy looks were kind of in. And if you didn't like that choppy look, you were in for a surprise with the models and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I remember feeling like it was definitely probably something more severe than I would have chosen on my own, but it was also kind of fun. And I thought, oh, well, what the heck? Like, I get to be this person for however long with this haircut, and, it'll grow back. It's all good.
So I have a question for you, and you have retired from teaching, or
just retired.
And I know you have, according to the website, you have a fellowship with the local, and I can't remember what it is. So please help me. Not a fellowship. You have something that goes on with a local, not local, but a theater maybe, or some sort of, maybe that was your teaching gig. Oh man, I can't remember right now.
Sorry.
Hold on. No, that is okay. It's for the, you know what? I'm just going to say it like this. Now that you're done teaching, because I know your book came out in about 2017.
Yeah.
And that is your debut novel. And as far as I was able to find, your only novel so far.
Yep.
Now that you are done, and it's award winning, well received. I mean, hundreds of reviews, and you're at like 4.9 stars. That's ridiculously good.
And a Lammy finalist.
I mean, you are not a bad writer by any means. Now that you're done teaching, are you going to give us and grace the world with a second novel?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I've been working on one for a while, and I guess like in my circle of friends, it's kind of a joke that I'm as slow as I am at writing, but I'm also just not a great multitasker. So I'm, that's part of the joy of retiring, is I feel like I can focus. And I actually have a 3-week residency coming up in France, as it happens, in September. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I'm working on a novel that takes place partially in Senegal. Okay. And when I was, I'll try to make this brief, but when I was there, go back to that map of Africa, right? The westernmost bump is Senegal. There's a country, Senegal looks, I can't do it right for the camera, but if Senegal looks like this, there's a country that sticks in the middle of it like this, and that's the Gambia. And the Gambia is an English-speaking country surrounded by Senegal, which is a French-speaking country, okay? And when I was there, I lived in the Casamance region, which was south of the Gambia. And it would often threaten to secede from the rest of Senegal for various and sundry reasons. When I was there, and after I left, the separatists and the government rebels started using landmines to plant around the villages, right, to trap people. And then the separatists would use it to prevent the soldiers from coming in. But who gets hurt with landmines are women and children. Yeah. It's not generally the soldiers ever, because it's the women who are doing all the work in the villages, and the kids are running around playing, and these are the ones who are getting maimed. So way back then, I was thinking about this a lot, and thinking like, how come we don't hear about this in the States? Like, we don't ever hear about all this stuff going on, and I want to write about it. But I also, as then time went by, there's always the, I don't know how to say it but whose story is it to tell? Like, is it my story to tell? Is it not my story to tell? Right? A lot of concern about this. And so I thought about it for a long time, and I thought, well, what if I can set the story in the US, and one of my protagonists is also an American woman? And so one of the main characters is a woman who is an engineer, and she works for a defense contractor, and they design the fuses for the landmines.
Okay.
But there's also a Senegalese woman who is hurt, who is maimed really by this land. She loses a leg as well as her ability to have children. And she's ends up at Mass General Hospital in Boston for her rehab, and their paths cross. And so the book focuses on both of them and their relationship, and they're dealing with the fallout, I guess, of this, of these things that happen to them both.
You do not write lighthearted comedies. Between either of the books, they're not rom-coms.
They're not rom-coms. And I love rom-coms. I don't know why I don't do that.
No, it's funny because I am the same way. Like, my favorite movies are all like rom-coms. I love rom-coms. The books, serious, like books to me should be something that challenges you and makes you, a little different walking away from the book. And I think your books will do the same for the readers, make them think a little differently than they did before reading it.
I hope so. And I think it's me trying to figure stuff out too a lot, my own self, like, what does this mean for me? And how do we all navigate these situations in the world, And
you are finding your way with the written word. And I think that we all appreciate that.
I hope so.
So with that, though, there's a lot of fun stuff, and I know people listening are going to want to buy the book. So where can we find you online and follow you, and where can we buy your books?
Okay. Well, The Year of Needy Girls, you can find wherever books are sold. It's on Amazon. It's on Bookshop, excuse me. So wherever sometimes it's in Barnes and Noble, like wherever you buy books, your local bookstore potentially. Should be in most libraries too, honestly. And I am at patricia-smith.com is my website. I should also mention that I do publish under Patricia as opposed to Patty, only because there's so many, Patti Smith, Queen of Rock and Roll, and there's Patti Smith, a slam poet, and there's so many Patti Smiths. So I was like, oh, all right, I'll be Patricia. So patricia-smith.com is my website, and you can follow me there. And I'm also I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I think it's Patricia Smith 585, I think, is my tagline or whatever.
Actually, it's the @Patty.Smith.585.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Because that is something I would not remember unless it was right in front of me. And I'm like, I got it pulled up. I can tell you that right now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah.
This has been an absolute delight, despite the serious subject matter. You are a wonderful person. If there was one bit of writing advice you would give to one of your students, what would that be?
I know one is so hard, but I think... because I think I'm going to try to sneak in too. But I think, and this is not original to me, and it might have even been Toni Morrison who said it originally, but it's to write the book you want to read. Like we're often told, like, write what you know. And okay, sure. But it's also write the book you want to read. And I think a lot of times, especially for kids, who don't see themselves in books or don't, find their lived experiences in books. It's like, write that book, go,
yes,
do that, write that book. And then the second piece I'm sneaking in is then you need to read.
I cannot agree with that second. I cannot agree with either of them more, but especially that second one, because you can't, writing books to me is like reading and writing go hand in hand. You can't perform heart surgery without first studying it. You can't write a book without first reading many books.
Exactly. I know. And I I get nervous a little bit at this point in my, having just left teaching, but so many kids, a lot of our kids are still reading, and that's gratifying. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, kids today, they're not reading, because a lot of my kids are readers. They're big readers, but a lot of kids don't have that attention span anymore. It's really, I think social media has really taken that out of them. And so I hope that if there's one thing, if there are teachers listening or other people who are working with kids, it's like try to get them back to finding their way to books and hanging out with books. And I think that's really important.
Thank you. And I thank you for the wonderful advice. And I can't disagree with that, because it would be nice to see the society getting back to a more sophisticated, read some more books and stuff like that. And nothing wrong with movies and television
Good thing,
shows,
right? Yeah.
but read some more books.
That's
Do
right.
something that's going to challenge you and change you. I want to thank you for joining us tonight and today, this episode, whatever tag I need to put on the end of that. It has been my absolute pleasure to chat with you and talk about the Year of Needy Girls. Everyone listening, first of all, thank you for listening and watching. And go buy her books, follow her online and all of that. And until next time, just remember, everyone, it costs nothing to be kind. So be kind.
Right.
Everyone, I will see you next time. Patty, stick around.
Thank you for listening to Drinking with Authors. Join us next time for another fun conversation with an author over drinks.